next door for you guys to kind of do a meet and greet. We'll do some introductions of the team and staff. We've got our presentation coming up as well as a Q&A session. And since we have such a small turnout or group this morning, we will have a breakout session, but it will be kind of a break-in. We will come to you with the questions as well as the information. And then we'll wrap it up and have some final thoughts. So our mission here at SEEED is to provide pathways out of poverty for young adults through career readiness training, environmental education, and community engagement. Our vision is to build healthy and regenerative communities in which we all thrive, beginning with ourselves. And our core values are sustainability, personal development, equity, and community. A little bit more about SEED. SEED was founded March the 9th, 2009. Our executive director is Stan Johnson, and our chief of operations is J.D. Jackson. We have a couple of social enterprises here at SEED. One is our SHIP. It's a sustainable home improvement program. We also have a career readiness program, as well as green construction, and of course, my wonderful team of community engagement. So at this time, I want to invite our community engagement specialist, Kenya McKenzie, up to tell you more about what we do. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I'm a community engagement specialist at SEED. I'm also a former board member of CAC, a former director for New Beginnings, and I also my fun fact is I love to write poetry and music. What is community engagement? Community engagement serves as a liaison between government and non-government organizations and the communities of color in Knoxville. We distribute information to residents about available resources and programs to improve their quality of life. The power of community engagement: number one, we solve problems, building strong communities, and empowering individuals, and we also do so much more. What's the importance of the community issue survey? Number one, we want to make our voice heard. We want to understand the community needs, and SEED advocates and target funding and real programs addressing real issues. I also want to take this time to introduce my next colleague, Tori.
Hey everyone. Hi, as Kenya said, my name is Tori Howard. I'm a community engagement specialist. I graduated from Fulton in 2020. I also graduated from the CRP program in 2024. I have a degree in criminal justice, and my fun fact is I was in marching band and played the flute for 3 years. So in no particular order, these are the top 5 issues we are facing: inflation, unaffordable utilities, unaffordable housing, gun violence, and transportation. Starting with inflation. Some of the causes of inflation include increased production costs, labor issues, and market disruptions. As you see this chart right here, it shows the Tennessee CPI. For those who do not know what a CPI stands for, it stands for the Consumer Price Index, and Tennessee is above the national average. We're averaging around 4% compared to the country, which is around 2.6 to 2.7%. So hopefully as time goes on, we're able to lower those percentages and buy affordable things. Next, we have unaffordable utilities. The national energy burden. For those who have never heard that term before, the national energy burden is the percentage of income that goes towards energy costs. So low-income households face a 6% energy burden, which is 3 times the 2% burden for non-low-income households. The Tennessee Energy Security reported in September of last year that 23% of households struggle to pay an energy bill, with the average monthly cost of $406.52. Next, I want to pass it on to my colleague, Ms. Keesley, to talk to you about affordable housing crisis.
Hi, as Tori said, my name is Keeska Johnson. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at SEED. I served in the U.S. Army. I'm a stewardess at Bethel AME Church. I graduated from the CRP program in 2015, where I started in customer service for about 10 years, and then I came back to serve the community. And my fun fact is that I love to go fishing. So this is a visual representation of what the housing market here in Knoxville looks like. So you're buying an outhouse basically for those mansion prices. So once we go into the affordable housing crisis, we want to think about the supply and demand imbalance that there is here in Knoxville. So we have an influx of residents coming to move here into Knoxville, but we don't have that supply of homes, which raises those house costs, and it causes a high rent burden, which leads us straight into homelessness. So when you talk about causes of homelessness, you want to think about low-wage jobs, as well as those systemic barriers that kind of block some people from having opportunities. So, you know, the higher your education, the higher paying job you kind of have access to. So keeping those systemic barriers in mind, as well as like a criminal record that can stop you from getting certain housing or maybe being able to apply for certain positions. So when we're thinking about other causes for homelessness, you want to think about untreated mental health issues, as well as limited access to rehabilitation. So once you start thinking about how much like government money or state money is spent on mental health and rehabilitation, you would see that it's not really enough for us to actually mitigate that issue that's going on here in Knoxville. So now I'd like to pass it on to my colleague Tony to talk to you guys about gun violence and transportation.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Brother Tony Gunn, and I have been adopted by the community engagement team this year, and I'm excited to be working with you guys, and y'all really been a big help to me. So thank you in advance. But I am a UT graduate, graduated in 2020 with a degree in sociology, and then again just this past December with the MBA. So that was pretty cool. I've done 2+ years of marketing and product management through Good Visionaries. I'm also a former project grad coach and also a community engagement coordinator for the Leadership Foundation a few years ago. And I just love the creative arts. So all things music, all things dance, all things jazz, you get the drift. So going into gun violence, we've identified 3 main reasons why that happens in our community. First is chronic poverty. People just don't have the means to get what they need. The second thing is the lack of youth opportunities. We've seen different programs sprout up. We've seen different organizations try to do something, but the truth of the matter is, it's just not enough for our children. We have to do more. And then the third reason is the obvious, right? It's the rising gang violence and activity that we've been seeing here in our Knoxville community that needs to be addressed. Now, just some statistics from our Knoxville crime report, right? So from 2020 to 2021, we saw an increase in homicides from 38 to 41, which reached record highs, you know, so that was a pretty tragic thing. And just to be honest, we even know some of those young individuals, youth and young adults that were victims of gun violence. And then in 2022 to 2024, the firearm cases pretty much increased. We peaked at 77 incidents in 2023 before dropping. So we went from 45% to 42%. But again, that is very, very high for our community, and that's why we're here. So when you go into the issue of transportation, obviously the CAT buses are very restrictive. They don't run regularly, and they don't get our people to the places that they need to go, especially involving or revolving around getting them to their proper workspace. A lot of those jobs are a little bit further out, so they're not going to those places. So we have to address that issue for sure. Car dependency, right? So we don't have one of those cities or one of those communities where everything is close together. A lot of people need that transportation to get where they're going. And then we also deal with a lot of traffic congestion. So in the mornings, there's not enough lanes, there's not enough roads for us to really ride on. And there's so many issues, especially during rush hour. So when you put all these different problems together, we understand it is very hard for the average person to actually just go to the grocery store, right? The grandmother who needs to go to the grocery store, or just everybody who needs to go to get a job. Some of our youth and young adults, when they're trying to go to their jobs, they're held up by Uber, they're held up by Lyft. And some of them don't even have the money to even get that type of transportation. So what do we do to help them? That's what we're here to talk about. So with that being said, I want to pass it back to Dr. Parks, who's going to talk about our break-in session. If you will, we'll be discussing that amongst everybody here, but also our online community. If you're watching on the digital space, be sure to comment questions, and we'll be sure to get back to you with the answer.
Great job, Tony. Great job. So our break-in session, like Tony just mentioned, we've got 6 categories, okay? We have inflation, homelessness, unaffordable housing, gun violence, transportation, and unaffordable utilities. So at this time, each community engagement specialist is going to come up and ask the questions to the community, to the audience. And we would like to get interactive and have some feedback to address some of these problems. So at this time, who has the inflation slide? All right, back to Tony.
All right, thank you, Dr. Parks. So with the group that we have here, obviously inflation is one of the biggest issues that we're facing currently. It is a hot topic. I got a pen. It is a hot topic, but we've been seeing this trend for the past couple of years. It didn't just happen today. So with that being said, anybody in the crowd, are there significant items that you've seen inflation target for you that's been difficult for you to buy currently? So are there any items that you've seen a significant increase in? And I'll walk around with the mic.
Eggs.
Okay, we got eggs. Off the rip. Anything else? I know I saw a very huge increase in our vegetables and our fruits. They are not the same price anymore. You used to get a bag of oranges for cheap, and you definitely can't get them now.
Home insurance.
Okay. Home insurance.
Maintenance costs.
Okay.
Plumbers, electricians.
I mean, when he says that, car insurance is absolutely out of control at this time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Child care.
Just keep throwing them out. I'm writing them down.
Housing prices.
And we will address that in our unaffordable housing. Lord have mercy. Rent, yeah. Gone other days we could buy an apartment for $600. That was just in 2015. You know, now it's $1,200, $1,400.
I'm gonna say education.
Oh wow. And a part of that too, when you talk about the inflation in education prices, a part of that is an effect of COVID, when numbers were down for admission. So a lot of these universities are trying to recoup, and they're raising the prices, and they're letting everybody just come in because they're trying to make money.
Tariffs.
Okay.
It's coming.
Ain't nobody said gas, so I'm gonna put it down. Gas always going higher. All right, so I want to jump to this question right here because it kind of gauges where we can start implementing solutions. So with the lack of produce and things like that that you shop for every day, are there any local places that you feel like you can get cheaper produce or feel like you can get anything for free? Are you aware of certain community resources? You can just shout them out.
Yeah, Battlefields Farms on Wednesday has a mobile bus that goes around and gives away free vegetables and healthy food options.
Do you know, and you said they go around when?
On Wednesday,
And about what time?
3, 4 in the afternoon. I think if you go to battlefield.com or alliance.org, they can give you a time and stuff. But Chris Battle is over, and they do a great thing as far as free food they give away every week.
Absolutely.
They've been doing it for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, so for the people in the digital space, we have identified Battlefield Farms. They're coming through with the bus on Wednesday during the evening to give you fresh produce. And that is on the east side, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you can visit their particular website or alliance.org to get more information for you in the digital space. Yes, ma'am. United Grocery Outlet. Where is that located? Okay. We're gonna have to check that one out because that is kind of a little bit further out from our service zone. When you talk about people who live in East Knoxville, and the people that probably need those resources for that. So, yes, sir.
You have local churches.
Okay, yeah, local churches. I know Greater Warner
Warner.
does stuff on the weekends.
Leonard Sidney, they do it on Wednesdays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays.
And you said, what was that church?
Leonard Sidney?
Lenacy?
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
I think St. James,
Yeah, St. James,
on Chestnut
Chestnut,
and Selma,
yeah.
right across the street from Old Chestnut Park. I think it's Greg Hodges Park now, something like that. They give on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they give food out.
Okay.
Did they give food out at Love Kitchen? Love Kitchen.
Fish.
Feed.
Fishers. Okay. So Fishers on Central, Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you can hear that in the digital space. All right, and this is going to be kind of action oriented, and we're going to kind of wrap up some of the questioning so we don't just overlap, and I'm going to give some of my colleagues some more time. But as the rise in food programs see an increase in demand, what type of support do you think we need, or infrastructure do you think we need to build to keep these certain resources going and sustainable? I know, like we said, we called out these different areas, different churches, but what are some ideas that we can throw out there as a solution to make sure that we're not only keeping these programs up, but we're also getting these resources to people who are not able to get out of their homes or not able to travel to South Knoxville? Stan?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is we need to learn how to grow our own food. So just even in your backyard, having a little 6x6 plot to actually grow some vegetables or, fruit tree, anything of that nature. Because if the neighborhood started doing that, we could trade, switch with each other, barter and stuff like that, like we used to. And there's a lot of community gardens around too that people should get involved with.
Okay. Just a plug for our edible forest. We will be having that at SEEED for Earth Day, and that is April the 19th. So come out and learn some of the things that Stan has talked about in regards to planting your own food. I think that's essential, but also too, we know that's a process, and SEED is ready to walk with the community with that process. But let's throw out some things that are more immediate. Like I said, we have those resources that we yelled out, but what are some ways we can get those resources to people who are not able to go and get them themselves?
We got a mic in the audience.
Yes, a mic in the audience.
So the people in cyberspace can hear us.
Yes, ma'am.
This will be a kind of a twofold, thought process. One, making sure that the resources are in maybe a centralized place for people to know where to go to get them. A digital platform, a connection through SEED that has, find your resources here. That's one thought. And then the other thing, volunteers. Get some college students, some young people who can drive, who can take food to Grandma and them, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I love that idea. And even in my mind, when I heard you say that, I thought about there's so many underutilized, vans and buses that these churches have, and they might just need a little financial support to put some gas in it, or rally some people around to help fix them up, and maybe we can utilize some of our church connections to make sure that we can serve our individual locations. And we know there's a church, pretty much on every which way that we turn. So if everybody could be responsible for their section or their neighborhood, we can start putting them in centralized locations and delivering them to the community based on these church locations.
I have something to say. So I'm from Knoxville, but I moved to Nashville in 2007. And I come back here from time to time just to see what's going on. And I hear that we've got churches in this area, that area, a lot of different churches in different areas. There needs to be a connection and a collective of churches coming together to work together so that we can serve our community. If everybody's just working in their own section, it still keeps us isolated. Mm-hmm. Because when we come and work together, then you can learn how to, like Stan just said, let's teach people how to grow food. So if this community is growing food, but the community up the road isn't growing food because we're not communicating, we've got to bring it together. We've got to come together. We have to stop gatekeeping. We've got to work together because we're not, as Black people, we're not going to be able to survive what's happening right now, and even to be able to have longevity, and for our families to be able to sustain what's happening to us as a community.
Yes, ma'am, I totally agree. And just to hit on that point, what we see that we're starting up is the reason why we started these community conversations. So before we did it here at OBC, we had one a couple of weeks ago at Honey Rock. And what we found was people come out to the community and the churches that they go to. So I hear what you're saying. How can we connect the bridge from community conversations 1 to 2 to 3, and then come together as a whole to learn the same things that we're teaching and repeating over and over again to make sure that nobody's left behind. I definitely agree.
And that may be that we get the digital world connected, where we are, maybe people don't have the transportation to come to the different events. They may be homebound, but finding a way where we can communicate that. Most of us, even if we're low income, have some type of cell phone or some way to access the internet. So if that's communicating that or getting the young people out to go to the communities, knock on doors and have the conversations.
Yes, ma'am.
There's some things that, even though we need to progress and move forward, there's some things that our communities used to do that we can go back and what we learned from those things and repeat them, because it's our cycle. It's technically our cycle. We're going through it at different phases and different times, but one of the things that I heard on the internet was how people are complaining that food stamps are now not going to be able to be used to buy prepackaged items. Well, when I was young, you couldn't buy prepackaged items. You had to actually buy food that you had to cook at home and make it last. And so there are some things that we, from our prior generations, that we can hold on to and bring back. And there are some things that obviously we need to be able to transition through, but we've got to be more intelligent about making sure that our culture learns. And like he said, growing your own food. I remember my grandmother, she lived in Waterpee. She had a little community garden right there at her steps. I remember going to Maynard Elementary. I remember, how the school and the teachers, everybody came together as a culture, as a community. It didn't matter if I was from Lonsdale or Mechanicsville. We had to work together. So there has to be a pipeline of somebody needs to communicate so that we can all make it through this.
Absolutely, absolutely. You said a mouthful, and I remember, and no, that was good. That was good. You said a mouthful because I even remember me growing up. My grandmother had a full garden with cucumbers, collards, tomatoes, everything there, and we never went to the store to just get simple produce we had in the backyard. But we're definitely going to take what you said and what everybody has said in regards to inflation and all these resources, and we're going to actually come up with a game plan to present not only to the mayor and all the leaders, but also to the community as well, so we can have a collective solution. So now I just want to bring up one of my other colleagues that's going to talk to you about the homelessness population and that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I just got voluntold to make sure I do a good job here. So Hi, everybody. My name is Stan Johnson. I'm the executive director and co-founder of SEEED. One of the things that you guys have seen here, we're doing a community conversation to talk about some of these issues, but we want to also talk about what's going to make us thrive as well, right? So when we bring all this information back to the community, we'll see what some of those solutions are. This is not just going to be about problems, it's just about issues. We're wanting to do that at first, right? And one thing, these young ladies said something about a CRP. I'm not sure if you guys understand what that is. That's our career readiness training program. We actually train people in our city for 8 weeks. We do a life skills, job skills, and training, life skills, job skills, and placement skills class that we do for these young folks. So that's the biggest thing that we want to talk about, as well as homelessness. So I'm going to ask you guys, in what ways does homelessness affect our community?
Where did it start? Homelessness affected communities because obviously from the standpoint of what we see at SEED, we see a lot of young people that are counseled. They don't have a permanent address. They just go from place to place. They get in with their friends, have to move somewhere else. If they get in with their parents push them out and stuff. And the way it affects you have to have a place called home. If you don't have a home, you don't feel worthy. And a lot of the homeless, that's just that, and some of it is wrapped around mental wellness. And a lot of it's transportation challenges, don't have a job, poverty, basically. That's what the homeless is part of, is the poverty situation.
Wow. Thank you, sir. Yeah, just talk to me, just act like we at the crib somewhere and we just talking about something. Like, what kind of effects are you guys seeing that homelessness is having on our community?
Me personally, one thing I've seen, especially amongst my peers, thank you, sir. One thing I've seen, especially amongst my peers, is they graduate high school, they start off well, they start off with jobs, but ultimately the job may cut hours, or the job is not paying enough money, and now they're getting evicted out of their apartments. So now they're on the street because the jobs that we are advertising, we say that they're good jobs, but they're technically not good jobs, and they're falling below the national minimum wage for the United States. And we can't expect people to come and, for lack of a better term, work seasonally and have homes all throughout the year. It's just not sustainable at all. So I think that's the biggest impact, is how are we able to get those jobs at a livable wage and break down that barrier.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think also with when we talk about the homelessness, you have to talk about mental health, and you have to talk about substance use and misuse. A lot of people in that population have been affected by mental health. If you notice, you see people walking around having a conversation with themselves, or just doing something that seems bizarre, and it's because they actually need some type of diagnosis and some type of medication. And so, coupled with nowhere to actually go, you're mentally not even stable. And so that creates a whole different problem, which turns into poverty, which turns into crime, which turns into addiction. And so the homeless piece is almost just one rung on the actual ladder. It goes into, or maybe one branch on the tree. Yeah, it's a deeper rooted problem than just them being homeless. There's several other factors that contribute to that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to agree. I was at the Law Library, and I was doing surveys, and I ran across a neighbor that was 21 years old, and I asked him how he was doing, and he told me he was homeless. And he was a graduate, a young, enthusiastic person, but he told me he he suffered from mental illness. And so he had a bag in his hand, and he told me he was on his way to the homeless shelter.
Wow. And you guys are jumping ahead of me here just a second, but I'm gonna bring us back into that process of mental illness. So if you go outside and you see people just laying on the ground, that's not happening here in Knoxville, is it? Here in Knoxville, you can just walk outside and see people laying on the street. Now, the question is, what are we going to do about it? Right? Are we going to stop by and ask, can I help? Are we going to go by and see if we can feed somebody? Those are the kind of things that we're going to have to start thinking about as well. So I'm going to jump to the next question. How can mental health issues in homeless communities be addressed?
I don't want to ball hog, but there are programs that are set up, such as the Ellen Ross McNabb. You have Covenant Health. You have different organizations that have more or less a triage for people who need immediate mental health care or services. The problem is a lot of these resources are unknown. So unless you're actually in a capacity in that field, a lot of the people that need the help don't know where to get it.
Wow.
So sometimes the help has to find the patient instead of the patient finding the help.
Yes, ma'am.
So when I lived here in Knoxville, I actually worked at Helen Ross McNabb for 9 years.
Okay.
As a mental health case manager. So we actually began the process back, and I left here in 2007, so we actually began the process. We were actually counting the homeless population to see where most of them were getting their resources from, you know, where they were living, helping them stay stable on medications and things like that. So a lot of it is self-medicating, so they're going to be using drugs. Some of them don't qualify for the benefits to be able to get the help.
Ouch.
One of the things that we started when I was there.
Wait a minute, wait. If you're homeless, that means you ain't got no income, right? Is that?
You don't have an income, and you also don't have an address.
Oh.
So that your resource, so that you can potentially get some resources. And then we all know Social Security, if you apply for that, you're not going to get it the first time. You're going to continue to apply before you're going to qualify. So some of those are issues, and then just keeping up with people.
Yeah.
So I may be case managing you, but if I got to go all over the city to try to find you. So one of the things that they tried to do was to begin the system where they were tracking if you got services over here last week, and there's a communications, you know, where they are able to see, okay, they were at CAC last week and got help over there. Let's see if we can find out where they're at now. So there's a lot of different things that follow along with that, but to even go deeper with that, I have a son that's 26 years old. He's a young adult who went into the military. He gave them 7 years, and right before he was getting ready to come out, he had a traumatic experience, and so now he's experiencing mental health issues. So one of my passions, because not only have I experienced it, but now I've got a young adult that's going through this, who went and got 2 years of college, who, you know, gave himself to this country, that knew all these things when he's dealing with homelessness. Well, he's not dealing with homelessness because mom's protecting him there. But one of the things that I see some of the older cultures do that we don't do anymore is having family, and it doesn't have to be your blood family, where you've got a home where everybody lives together and helps everybody get stable. You know, one of the issues with having mental health is because you're imbalanced. You know, so you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly. So even just non-medicated ways of helping people get stable, we don't even know how to do that because we think therapy is not right. So it's a whole mindset that comes along with the whole issue with mental health, and especially in our community. We won't go to therapy. We don't want to take the medications to help us get stabilized so that we can get focused, because it doesn't mean it's a permanent situation. And then we stigmatize mental illness.
That was you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop because I'm talking about that.
I agree with you on that. father was a veteran, and he lost his home, and he had to move in with me, and he didn't want to go to counseling. And I had to get an advocate to come and support me on getting him into some counseling. Once he got the counseling, he gained a home, and he gained, employment, but it took him 6 years to get out of my home, to get stable.
In my intro, I had, mentioned that I am a Navy veteran. I served 15 years in the United States Navy. Went through a few other campaigns from Desert Shield, Storm, Iraqi Freedom, Kuwait, and I got out of the military in 2004. I did not find out I had PTSD until 2018. So all those years, from even on active duty, I did not realize that something was off until almost 15 years after I got out of the military, because of the stereotype. We don't, and what happens in this family stays in this house, or you're weak if you have any type of mental health. Men don't cry, you just have to suck it up. And so, and we self-medicate, we act out. There are a lot of things that go with just getting the proper care. And a lot of times as a culture, we don't necessarily agree or trust where the care is coming from. We're skeptical. So we don't want to go to the doctor. We don't want to say how we're really feeling. We don't want the medicine because it could be something else. And so there's a lot of just different factors. We're talking about homelessness, but we also definitely talking about mental health in the Black community. I think that's really maybe a whole different community conversation that we need to have.
Well, that's the point of this whole thing, right? Because if we don't talk about it at all, right? We're saying nobody's talking about it. We have to be that safe space and we can actually have that conversation. And even thank you for being vulnerable and tell us that happened to you. Thank you very much. But as we're talking about that, what can we do to prevent it? Like, what can we do to prevent homelessness when we actually see somebody headed down that road before they get down that road? Is there such a thing? Or do we just find people homeless and then we just say, now let's try to help them? Is there a way to actually talk to people preventatively to talk about how this works?
I believe that one of the things that needs to happen is education, financial education. Financial literacy doesn't get taught in school, it actually gets taught at home. So if you come from a home that teaches finance and teaches financial understanding, you're more likely to be able to navigate. And because we have that disconnect in our community, then we're disconnected. So I think one of the things that needs to happen is people in the community that have that information to be able to collectively come together and budgeting.
Understanding your credit score, because we get out here and buy stuff that is crazy high because we didn't understand what the credit score was.
And the discipline to say no.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, I just heard we don't talk about mental health. Do we talk about finances in this?
You can't learn what you don't understand.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if it's in the home, if you don't.
Well, I'm just making, see, what I'm hearing is the stuff that we need is the stuff that we're not talking about. That's kind of a theme I'm hearing.
I'm gonna add to that. It deals with mental health on an aspect, but one of the things we have to address is a culture or a nature, because when you look at culture, it's a learned practice. Is you keep doing something over and over and over and over and feel like that's the normal, that's the way. And what you end up doing is handicapping yourself where you can't get outside that box. I always think of a story that my godfather used to tell me. Is kind of like a grandmother who used to cook a turkey and she passed down her recipe. But she used to always cut the ends of the legs off And so years and years and years later, the family kept doing it. And so the great-grandchild finally went and asked the great-grandmother, why did you cut off the ends? And she was like, well, that's the only way to fit in my pants. But now we got bigger pans, but still doing the same thing. Because the recipe we felt like worked. So it's kind of like that idea in terms of addressing the culture. And the reason I say that is primarily from experience. I'm originally from Mississippi. So in our culture is a lot different from a lot of other cultures. So for prime example, when I went to college, I had a teammate who literally he had to go to college. And the expression that was given to him is, you're a grown man now. You either go to college or you get out of my house. And so what ends up happening is even after college, he went to college just for general studies, for something that he didn't even know he was going to school, because it's like, what am I going to do in the real world when I don't have anything, I don't have an opportunity? So what ended up happening is he becomes a nomad, is moving from place to place, just trying and testing things out, trying to see what works, because he wasn't given a foundation or a structure. And so when it comes to culture, as a black man in general, it is expected that once you become a man, you got to get out the house. But what foundation do you have at that point in time? How do you grow? But when you look at other cultures, they can stay in the house. And one of the biggest things is, and I look at kind of like Asian culture, is they will pile multiple groups of people, generations in one house, and let one that they support go to college, become a doctor, become something big, and then it makes that whole family flourish. But as a black community, we don't do that. And that's a part of our culture, though.
I'm also hearing, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. We keep doing it, right? So what you just said was break a generational cycle. We have to start talking about these things. So thank you guys so much for your participation in that. I think we're going to jump into unaffordable housing. So we want to make sure that we continue this conversation. Let's not miss out on the conversation that we're going to have with each other, right? And take this home with you as well and start talking about some of these issues. Thank you very much.
Hi again, I'm Kiska Johnson, the Community Engagement Coordinator at SEEED. So I'll be talking about unaffordable housing. So the first question I have for unaffordable housing would be, how does the lack of unaffordable housing impact communities beyond just those struggles to find a place to live?
Say the question again.
How does the lack of affordable housing impact communities beyond just those struggles to find a place to live? So for me, it would be like just stability in general. If you don't have a place to live, then from start to finish, your day is unknown.
I think the biggest issue for the communities in Knoxville are our historical sites. Historical communities who've been here for decades, 100 years or more. What we've seen now, and we know what they are, but there's a lot of gentrification happening. And there's a lot of people moving in our community. And once they move in, getting better opportunities, making the same amount of money that they're making in California, right? It can work from home. And now they're moving to the east side and they're buying up homes. Because that is happening, it's impacting the people who've been here for so long. And they're actually pushing us out. They're pushing us to South Knoxville, they're pushing us to other communities. And when we get there, we're going to have much of the same stuff. So I think that's the biggest impact that we're having is the east side ain't the east side no more, for lack of better terms. And also, too, the way that they're doing it is they're taking houses that are run down, that have not been updated since 1978 or later. And they're having an excuse to move people out of their homes. They're rebuilding those homes on those newer plots now and letting people buy those homes for $350,000 or more. And I don't know about you, but on Fifth Avenue back in the day, homes were not $350,000 for 2 and 3 bedroom homes. So we have a real big issue, and I don't think that like we can write legislation like to resolve our issues or resolve our problems, to be honest. But one thing I do think that we can do is, going back to what this mother said back here, is get educated. So there are multi-family homes that we're not talking about where we can have, we might pay $350,000, but now we have 3 complexes. So we can put mama in it, we can put our sons and daughters in them, and sustain it. So yeah, that's the biggest issue with unaffordable housing to me.
Just want to kind of add a shameless plug. We do have a financial planning and a financial literacy workshop monthly. It's on the 3rd Thursday of each month at 1617 Dandridge Avenue, Morningside Community Center. It is free. It is hosted by the community engagement team, as well as guest speakers and experts within that field. So please take advantage of that community resource and getting educated about your finances as well as your portfolio or future.
I'll add my 2 cents because I like to talk a lot. A couple of different things with that. First of all, there are resources to help people get first-time home ownership. There's resources even within that. There's a program called NACA, and I'm not sure if it's here, NACA. I don't remember what the full name is. And it is in THDA, Tennessee Housing Authority, is that here? So some of those programs will educate you on how to actually qualify to get a home loan, and then also how to, if you can find the right type of property, and they probably have those here in Knoxville, where you can find a portion of that to make a unit where you can rent out to someone and use that to help you pay your mortgage back. So there's different resources like that. And then the second part of that is when those homes that are on East Fifth Avenue, how do we find out who owned those homes? How do we find out if it's a property tax issue? Because sometimes it's issues with property taxes, like everybody may live there, but everyone's not contributing to keeping the property taxes paid. So yeah, the city wants you to let it go down because they know what their plan is. So as a group of people, we have to come together. You know, we have a lot of churches here. Buy out some of these things. Buy the properties up and find the loans, because there's loans out there. My friend Timothy Allen over here, he knows a lot about some of these loans. And he told me a long time ago, the bank's not going to tell you what's available to you out there that can help you with these resources if you don't ask. And they're not telling us. So you have to find people that know that information, and you go in there and you ask for those resources.
So as far as the question, you posed a question about how you can find out who the homeowners are of these different plots and everything. So we have a website called KGIS, and it'll give you all of that information if you go on that website. And all you have to do is either know the owner's name or the address itself, and then you can pull up that information.
I would like to give another shameless plug. SEED is invested a lot in this space as far as affordable housing. We know gentrification is coming. I'm from Nashville. Anyway, I'm from Nashville. Nashville's in the thrones. Nashville's in the full throne of gentrification. Nashville's beginning to ramp up. And at SEED, we believe in development, but without displacement. What we're doing, we are facing the issue and being a solution to what we see the problem is getting Section 8 voucher homes or low-income families into homes. We build homes in marginalized communities. We sell them to low-income families. We sell solar homes so they're energy efficient. And we have a workforce component to do that, to help get young people jobs in the green construction or in the construction industry. And we built 3 houses right now. We want to build 4 or 5, and we're trying to do that. I mean, it's a heavy lift. More organizations need to do something like that, but you have to do something, and that is build homes. You know, start that generational wealth. That is one of the best agent or mechanism to get generational wealth is home ownership and the pride of ownership.
Life insurance.
Yeah, life insurance too.
Most people can't afford to buy a home other than leasing or renting, and the prices that are going now when, for say, they buy a house up, buy it cheap, renovate it, rent it high. Rent prices now are going what, $1,200 to $2,000, depending on the size, maybe more if it's a 3, 4, 5 bedroom. And a lot of people can't afford to even rent a place, a house or apartment. And that's why you have so many families now that are staying, moving back home with mom and dad. You'll have the mother, the daughter, her kids, maybe the daughter's kids, but they can't afford it because gentrification making the rent prices high. Okay, not making enough money to afford a place. And, you know, the first thing someone's going to do is they're going to make sure they have a vehicle, so they go back and forth. I can stay with mom and dad until I get on my feet. But sometimes you're not able to get up back on your feet because you're not making enough money on your job. Prices are getting so high in the community. And we were talking about them coming in and buying a house cheaper and renovating it and selling it for maybe $250,000, you know. And that makes the property values go up in the neighborhood. And once the property value goes up, everything else goes up. And so you can't really afford to live in certain areas, and it's harder to find rent in certain areas because everything just skyrockets.
When I think of affordable housing, I also think about what all comes along with housing, right? Like, it's supposed to be like 30% of your whole total income is supposed to be your housing budget, is what they would tell you in the professional world, right? But your utility bills used to come into that. Now, if you buy one of them older homes, built before 1978, that was really when the first housing standards came along, right? So insulation, windows, doors, how thick your walls are, those things actually came into value. Now, we'll blame a lot on the utility companies for this, but we use a lot of utilities, right? But if we have a leaky house, guess what's going to happen to that energy? We're going to waste it. So that's another thing that we can actually do. Grandma needs to put the plastic over their windows and put the blankets under the door. Now they got to take our weatherization. You can actually weatherize your home and actually save some money on your utility bills as well. So when I also talk about housing prices, it's not just in the aspect of rent is higher, right? So that's affordable housing if you renting something or it's apartments, but affordable houses where you can actually grow your family and build those generational wealth and things of that nature. We have to start thinking past ourselves, right? So even if I did buy a little house on Fifth Avenue 10 years ago for $50,000 or whatever, it cost me another $50,000. Hopefully Tim will give me a loan and I'll learn how to do that kind of stuff. And then to come in and weatherize my home and all that kind of stuff. And actually I can stay there and then build me a little exterior dwelling where I can actually keep my grandson in my side so they don't have to be in my house messing up stuff. You know, so it's ways of doing this kind of stuff, but we have to make sure that when we're phrasing this, it's not just an aspect of unaffordable housing, it's unaffordable houses because of these other things that go along with it. So.
All right,
I'll move on to the next question. So, what role should the government play in addressing unaffordable housing, if any, and what policies might actually work?
Well, the city of Knoxville has put a lot of emphasis on the missing middle. And the missing middle is not income based, it's on how much housing stock that's available. You have a lot of big projects coming on with 100-unit apartment complexes, and then you have single houses that have been built. But the duplexes, the fourplexes, the eightplexes is what the city is pushing their energy into, to how they can get more of those type of housing stocks up to deal with the crisis of affordable housing. So that's what they're doing right now. I'm not trying to say how successful they are, because they just started it. They just started 6 months ago. They need some time. But they are addressing it and trying to see what role they can play to help out.
I do like some of the things that they're doing in the missing middle, because in like some of the historic neighborhoods, they're basically making a regulation that people have to, when they're building up those duplexes or multiplexes, they have to make it to where it goes seamlessly with the neighborhood. So you're not like, exactly, you're not like making it like a big apartment building in the middle of all these historic homes. So that is one good thing about the missing middle.
I mean, the government only going to do what the people ask them to do, right? So the government role is to do what the people's will is. But if the people don't say nothing, like we just was talking about our whole culture of not saying nothing about certain things, they ain't gonna play no role. So then when you start thinking about that part, you gotta think about how many people in these areas vote, right? Because that's what really drives a politician. That's what really drives, the political system. Some of these politicians will tell you real quick, I'm only here for my constituency. So that's the people who vote for them. So I ain't gonna say if the government have a role or not. We got to say that. And if we say that, we're gonna have to make sure that they do that.
What you said, you don't vote, don't complain. You don't vote, don't complain.
I guess the only thing that I would add to that would be more so along the housing code when it comes to building houses. Yeah. I do think that we should have a little bit of pushback so that we can have a little bit more sustainable houses. So they went back to, I want to say it's the 2009 code. Yeah. Yeah. So we did have a more recent code to where you have to do duct blasters and blower door tests to ensure that your ductwork was put in the correct way, which you didn't have any leakage or anything like that, same as your home. But those types of tests and inspections are not, you don't have to do that anymore. They're not mandatory anymore. So it's getting interesting out here.
That goes back to the people who vote, right?
Correct.
So what ended up happening in that, nobody is paying attention to those kind of codes. So we're talking 2009 versus 2018, where you had to do all those energy efficiency upgrades to your home, which is going to save you money on your utility bill. It cost the contractors a little bit more to build the house. The contractors vote as a group, and they lobby, and they went to the government and said, hey, we don't want to do it this way. It was fine back in 2009. Nobody's complaining. So let us go back. It went back, and very few people know that it was even here in the first place. So we got to get out there and get educated and vote on these kind of things.
Yes, we must vote on our local elections. So last but not least, how do cultural attitudes towards home ownership and renting shape the way we approach the housing crisis?
Yeah. So I think it actually goes back to like the young man was saying earlier about cutting chicken, right? They cut the legs off or the bottom piece. No one really knew why. And I think for us as a people, and I saw this up close, a lot of people were becoming this place because the home that they were renting was being sold. I mean, a lot of people went through that. And I was just curious, and I'm asking questions with some people, you know, how long have you lived in this house? You know, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. Why didn't you ever try to buy it? Because as a people, a lot of times it's lack of information. And when you don't know financially how to go about purchasing a home, and you just continue to rent the home, you're staying in the dark. You know, okay, we got a place, we have somewhere to live, and I just pay the rent. If something goes wrong, I call the landlord, he'll come out and fix it, right? So it's a responsibility thing, as well as just, I think, an educational standpoint. You know, some people just don't do because they don't know. Grandma rented, mama rented, now my sister's renting, and it's the same mindset if you lived in public housing and you lived in the projects. When I worked for KCDC, I would see young mothers bring their daughter to the office to put them on the waiting list as soon as they turned 18. It's a mindset. It was like this was put in place as a temporary fix for people in a certain situation. This was not put here for you to permanently be a part of that particular, class of people. And so a lot of times I think we tend to get stuck and satisfied with the bare minimum or just the help.
I just want to say that I agree with you. But also, I have coached a lot of people in the home buying process. And when I'm coaching someone to buy a home, I realize that even if it's an absolute great deal, some people will not pull the trigger because of anxiety. What if it's so heavy on people's mind? I'm a property owner. I'm a landlord, and I leverage credit when I have problems. So there was one year I had 4 water heaters that went out the same month. I know. And I said, it's got to be something with water. But as I was telling somebody about my problem, they said, "Oh God, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to put it on my credit account and deal with it a little bit at a time." So having the strategy to overcome obstacle makes the obstacle insignificant. But that's my field. And when I'm talking to a homeowner or a potential homeowner, there's one couple that I think about directly. I kept urging them right before interest rates went up. I said, if you don't make a move now, you're not going to be able to get as much house. And I think that's what's happening now, that a lot of times people say, well, I'll wait till next year. I'll wait till I get my stuff together. The best time to buy a house is yesterday. The second best time is today. So it's only going to get worse.
Hey man, you need to be up here every week doing that. So I think it's a stigma between both of them, right? What's a renter? What's a homeowner? What do I need to do as a homeowner? Like, I don't have to cut my own grass, do it, right? But as a renter, that might not be the case. Tim just talked about water heater going out. As a renter, you think you don't have to replace it, but you've been replacing it the whole time. You've been fixing it. You've been cutting the grass. You've been doing all of that kind of stuff. So the stigma between I don't have to do X because it ain't my house is the biggest problem, right? Because you're paying for it anyway. So the second piece to that is the how much more does a homeowner care about their property versus a renter, right? You can't throw garbage in front of my house. Nothing. You ain't finna go throw no garbage for a month. If you could go in the neighborhoods and you could tell if it's a rented neighborhood versus an ownership neighborhood. Just look at the grass. Look at the trash, look at the litter, right? You'll be able to tell. Those are the kind of things that people run to, say, I want to live out west because all of us is such and such. No. Them people pay a lot of money for that kind of stuff. But we have to start taking pride in ownership. That's the big thing to me. Is the question that says, how? I'm talking about the whys. Like, we have to get into the aspect of, I'm not going to rent my whole life so my kid could learn. You said something about KCDC and they was teaching their children how to actually do the process. It's the same thing with a house owner. You could teach your children way before they are ready to buy a house how to buy a house. They have first-time home buyers classes. So again, it's the education to me where how do I actually do this? And when do I start that process? Do I wait till I'm ready to buy a home, which should have been yesterday? Better time is today. And if we don't have the education, we got to wait till tomorrow to actually start that process. So starting the process to me is the best way to make sure that is irrelevant.
I'll add something on to the end of that. So I do think that our attitude as a community or as a people is a little bit skewed on the home owning when it comes to home owning, just because I don't think that we allow our young people enough time to like actually transition into adulthood and actually get their funds in order, get their credit score in order, just get everything that they need to actually have in order to go and buy your first home or whatever it may be. So like, I'll give you an example. So in the way I grew up, my father made us a transition room. So it was basically an office space on the outside of his home, and it had a bathroom and a little section of room. So that was your space until you got yourself together enough you saved enough to either buy a home or rent a home or do whatever it was that you were going to do outside of his home. So I just feel like if more parents can set their children up for success in that type of way, so like after they get out of school, give them a place so that they can save that money so they're not wasting it on rent or whatever else it may be, so they can transition out of your home quicker.
So I actually have to add something to that. So the problem that we find with that, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, because that's something that I did with my son. But the unfortunate problem that we find with that is there are a lot of single parent homes, and a lot of the parents don't even know how to do that themselves. So if I was never educated, or I kept making those same stupid mistakes of, not understanding my credit score, just not understanding how to save, don't understand what I need to have as far as a 3 to 6 month, emergency fund. I can't educate my child in order to do this, something that I don't know how to do. And then when we talk about education in the school system, we were taught how to look for a job. But what I hadn't heard, and there's some entrepreneurs in here, but our culture doesn't teach us how to become entrepreneurs so we don't have to depend on a job or to have multiple streams of income. Because just having a job isn't cutting it now. And then, okay, we've got a community of young children. Let's teach them how to maybe get 2 or 3 roommates, or even with the family. The mistake I made, and I can say this with my son, is I didn't make him pay rent before he actually went and bought a house. He didn't understand the importance of paying everything on time, because mommy gave him a comfortable space, so he saved his money, but he didn't know once you jumped out there in that ocean, there's some sharks out there. So, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, but most of us don't have the luxury of having a 2-parent home to be able to have that happen. And mom's working 2 or 3 jobs already. Yes.
I just want to add, my sister raised three of my nieces, and she bought her first home at 19. She's married, and she has allowed my niece to live in the home, and my niece had saved up $50,000 to buy her first home, and I'm patiently waiting so my son can transition into that house. I'm counting down the days.
Educating them and then making sure that they listen, because sometimes they don't listen.
There he is, right there, right.
All right, so now I'll pass it on to Dr. Parks to do gun violence.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about gun violence. So by show of hands, how many people have been affected by gun violence? Everybody? Yep, everybody. So how do you think gun violence has impacted our society in recent years? Where can
And on April Fool's Day, so it impacted me with not having he was an active father, he was involved, and when he got murdered on April Fool's Day, it impacted me because I was positioning myself to buy a home. And so it delayed my process of being an independent homeowner.
JD?
About 3 years ago, we invited this group from Chicago called Chicago Cred. They're violence interrupter nonprofit, and they came down and they said something that was so poignant to me and it stuck with me. He said that a lot of young people are dealing with a lot of traumas and dramas, and what happens is a lot of times they don't have the maturity to grow up quickly enough or the resources to deal with these dramas. So you have teenagers and young adults are having attention tantrums with guns in the streets.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so that stuck with me, that thought right there.
Absolutely. I know, back in me and Stan's days, there was nothing to probably get into an argument and just have a fist fight. And then we'll go, get some soda and some chips afterwards. But now, the younger generation, as far as emotional intelligence and anger management, it's a little different. They're coming from a different viewpoint. They don't have the same social interactions that we had growing up by being on sports teams and in the church or the choir or the band. We were always in some form of community. And now with technology, you see a lot of the younger adults, they're isolated. You can go to lunch or dinner and you'll see everybody just sitting there with their phone. And they can't interact with another person. They have to do it through technology. So, what do you think are the main causes of gun violence in our community? What do you think is causing the gun violence in our community? Yes, ma'am. You're pretty happy.
Thank you. I think one of the big triggers from what my experience with gun violence has been, and any type of retaliatory actions coming from children, the school shootings, things like that. Children were not told no. Mama had no problems telling me no, and now I understood there's a boundary. I understood there's a standard, because when Mama said no, she meant that, and any temper tantrum or whatever could have been met with a variety of things. A beat down, stern talking to. I didn't get a lot of stern talking tos. I got a couple beat downs, and I understood that there are consequences, and so I think that was just one of the big triggers for me, is making sure that we are getting back to the place where we're telling people no, you cannot, when that is the case, so that they understand, okay, there's some limits here. There's some standards that I have to adhere to. And then I think that gets them back to that emotional intelligence piece, to say, okay, let me check myself before I just go on this rampage and beat down or try to, take someone else's life because I don't like the way you looked at my hat today, or whatever the case may be.
question, comment up front. Kiski?
I just think that if our young men had a better outlet, i.e. like a better way to kind of have some sort of brotherly fellowship or fellowship amongst men, other than the gangs and different things like that, I do think that you would see a difference in the gun violence.
I want to add something to that because I think that's a great point. I think here's the issue, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers or anything like that, so I won't be specific for real. But I think we have a problem with organizations that say they're doing that, but they only allow a certain type of young man to be in their organization for whatever reason. And we're being exclusionary to young men who actually need that support. So it could be, any organization, or whether we're running it through the fraternity or whatever we're doing, we're not reaching out to the youth and the young adult men who actually need the help. And another thing I want to add as well, going back to education and being taught in schools and being trained and everything, the adults that are in our school systems don't know how to do conflict resolution. When a student's acting out in class, they either gonna send them to jail or send them back to school. And when I say jail, I mean ISS, because that's what it is. And they're not even learning in ISS anymore. It's school suspension for the people on the digital platform. Now, they are just sending them in there with no schoolwork, not reinforcing any type of learning. So now your kid is in ISS for the rest of the day with no phone, no windows, no nothing. That's a jail. Right? And then they don't even have anything that they're reading or trying to do. So, I mean, until we train our adults properly in these educational systems, our students are definitely going to look at them and think it's okay to act the way they're acting.
When I was in school, you got in trouble at school. When you got home, you were in trouble again. Like the parents, it's not the teacher's full responsibility to raise our children. We have to take responsibility for the behaviors that we send to school. And unfortunately, we can pivot this back to the mental health issues. When you have parents that have mental health issues, they raise children that have been brought up in trauma, alcoholism, drug addictions, they go to school and they act out. So now you've got another generation of children, the children are having behaviors because they don't have structure at home. And we all know, and most African American men know this, they are building jails because that's where they're sending our children. They don't want you to be rehabilitated. Government is not going to save us because if we depend on the government, we're going to continue to depend on the government. If we get healthy mentally, financially, government agencies have no place anymore because we're no longer using those services.
Just to add to that.
Good.
I heard that they go by the third grade reading scores.
That was it.
Exactly. Yeah, I was
It's still
Segue, she mentioned government. We have a government official here. We have the city council person, Amelia Parker, and I was telling you, talking about gun violence, and she would like to say something.
All right.
Well, I'm just here to listen. But I will echo some of the comments that I've heard, which are we do have portions of our community, our youth, who are just not being reached. And those are the ones who need to be reached. And what I'm doing, trying to show up in spaces like this, I was watching online before I drove down here really quickly to catch you all.
Thank you.
Is to try to be a part of these conversations to hear new solutions. Because I know that what's currently being done isn't necessarily reaching those who need to be reached. So I'm just here to listen. And thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. So you actually jumped into my fourth question. So we'll kind of go into the last one. But the fourth question was, what are some ways communities can work together to prevent gun violence? And so we just talked about there needs to be some type of fellowship for young men. They need to have organizations come out and help mentor and get these young men guided in the right direction. We need to teach the teachers conflict resolution. We need to make sure that they're equipped with the tools that they need to de-escalate the situation. And then also we need to give some training. So that was all good. You guys answered that before I even asked it. But finally, and What role do you think social media or the media itself plays in shaping public perception of gun violence?
Well, I just actually had a conversation with some media people about how they report stuff. Right? We have labeled East Knoxville a gun zone when we only report some of the killings that happen out west, you know, or out someplace else in the county or things of that nature. My biggest problem with it is just how we've always been targeted as the bad guy, right? The black male, it should say, right? So even the word black male means something, right? So what we have to also think about is also outside influences coming into our community, right? There is a big drug thing supposedly happening in Knoxville from Detroit, right? So how do we notice and prevent when we see people from outside coming into our spaces, right? So one of the things I look at is actually having these conversations more about talking about guns, right? Because it's not just the person that gets killed, family that suffers, right? The person, the persecutor's family also suffers because that person is going to be probably a dad or a brother or uncle or sister or somebody to that fact that just murdered somebody, that they're going to go spend the rest of their lives in jail as well. So we're losing two people out of our community, but we're actually affecting, as we just said, everybody in here was affected by gun violence at once upon a time. So we really need to bring that to the forefront and have more discussions, even in schools, right? Because people don't realize that there's two places in this. One, you just say, well, we'll just lock that person up. Well, that don't help the victim family. When my nephew got killed, they locked dude up for 30-something years. That did not help me at all to have no sovereigns, no nothing. I didn't care nothing about dude in the first place, much less to care that he went to jail for the rest of his life. So we got to make sure that we have that trauma treatment as well when these things are happening. And even before we have that trauma, actually start talking about it.
Thank you, Stan.
To answer your question, I'm gonna kind of hit your first question as well. In terms of, it's more of an indirect impact that gun violence has, and then I'll answer the last question as well. One of the indirect is along the lines of, as a African American male and being younger is being associated, because if it's in a community or if it's in an area, just me being in that area makes me a target. So it's an indirect way, whether it directly hits my home or indirectly, it's still an impact. But to answer the last part of your question is social media balloons that 10 times over. And the way that it balloons it is basically it hits mainstream or it gets circulated a lot faster in terms of different things that happen a lot faster without actual details and information, and then people adding their own speculations behind it. Or in terms of social media is you have social media police, is people coming up with their own theories, their own ideas. Also within gangs and within actual gun violence, it balloons it because people use that as a source to antagonize it or inflate it even more. Because I think directly with the situation that happened in Florida is soon as somebody died, the people who are quote unquote directly associated to it go on social media to laugh and make fun of it, which means everybody who's associated to that family and everything like that, now that anger is even more outraged, where it's like we have to respond, we have to retaliate. And so what social media does is you can't just ignore it when it's just in your face, in your face, in your face, which is even why you have basically people who get in certain situations, and it happens more on a higher platform, such as celebrities, where when drama hits, they just completely get off social media, is they have to completely disconnect, because when you see something over and over and over and over, you want to respond to it, but your response doesn't necessarily address it or help it. A lot of times it makes it worse, because you're going to have other people that quote unquote troll or basically try to pick what you say apart to make it align. So essentially it fights against itself more so than helps the situation.
I'm from a different generation, Generation X, and I'm in the house before it get dark, and I don't watch the news. So I really didn't know what was going on in Knoxville. Get up early, mind my business, mind my businesses. And if it wasn't for Stan inviting me to an event that he was having, I wouldn't have been able to participate with some other organizations. I went to the Boys and Girls Club this week and just sat in on a session with the group in Knoxville. And during that time, I don't mind to say that there was some gun violence that happened. Nobody pulled the trigger, just some, I guess you call it aggravated assault. They pointed the gun at the kids.
Wow.
And I'm traumatized. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. And just seeing the possibility of what could have happened, I'm saying, my God. But these kids, they are in a state of trauma that they didn't even react to. It's like another day. And I guess I'm saying all this to say that don't wait to be invited. Get involved.
Wow.
Get involved with organizations like SEED and find out what's going on, because I have grandkids, and once I seen these kids that were out here playing, they look like my grandkids. Those were my grandkids. And I'm going to do everything that I can to commit myself to making the city a safer place. Thanks, man.
All right, so unfortunately, it's almost 2 o'clock, and we don't have the space for the rest of the day. What I do want to encourage you to do, if you did not get a chance to fill out one of the community issue surveys, please fill that out before you leave today. Please make sure you sign our sign-in sheet so we can get a good head count of who all we had attend. And we'd like to send you a thank you message as well. And then also we have an evaluation on what we can do better. How can we make this workshop run a little smoother? What are some things we need to work on as well? So we definitely encourage that feedback. And please forgive me, I did not open up this meeting in prayer, but I am going to close it in prayer. So, go ahead, Stan.
Before you close in prayer, can you tell the people in cyberspace how to get the survey themselves and how they can actually be a part of the next community conversation?
Absolutely, absolutely. So our next community conversation is going to be at Open Doors Church. It's going to be April the 19th, and it's going to be from 11:30 to 1. We will have flyers on our social media website, as well as our homepage for SEED. You can get in touch with us at seedknox.org. If you have any other questions, feel free to go to our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and we will be posting upcoming events and dates that we have available to the community. All right. Yeah, if I can get you to bow your heads, please. Father God, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us this time and this space. Thank you, Lord, for this intimate gathering, for this community conversation, Lord. You know more what we need than we do. And we just want to ask for your grace and your mercy as you continue to guide us through these seasons in our lives. Help us, Lord, with the housing crisis. Help us, Lord, with our transportation issues. Help us, Lord, with our utilities. Help us, Lord, with the gun violence. And we just ask, Lord, that you continue to extend your love and mercy over us and help us to treat one another the way we would like to be treated. Once again, Lord, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this fellowship. And we thank you for this day. Please, Lord, give us travel and mercy as we leave this facility. Allow us to make it to our destinations safely. And once again, Lord, we just want to say thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.